The text came in at 11:47 on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I know the exact time because I had just checked my phone to see if my daughter had sent me the boys' arrival time. What I read instead was this: "Hey Mom, change of plans. We're doing Thanksgiving at Heath's parents' this year. Hope that's okay. Love you." 9 words in the middle sentence. That's what 4 days of cooking came down to. I was standing at the kitchen counter with flour on my apron and a cranberry relish cooling in the copper pot. My late husband had bought at a flea market in Savannah the year before he got sick. I'd been up since before 5, starting the relish the way my mother taught me, with fresh orange zest and a splash of dark rum. Not the recipe from the back of a bag, the real one that takes patience and a light hand with the sugar. I read the message twice, set the phone face down beside the cutting board, and went back to my work. I have a habit of not answering right away. I learned it young, growing up in a house where feelings were treated like inconveniences. Better to let the first wave pass before opening your mouth. My husband used to say I had the temperament of deep water, very still on top, moving slowly in ways most people never bothered to notice. I had started cooking Sunday. The turkey had brined in the refrigerator overnight, sitting in the big ceramic pot I only use twice a year. Monday was the pie crusts and the sweet potato casserole base. Tuesday was the cornbread and the rolls, the kind that need 3 hours of rising time and cannot be rushed under any circumstances. By Wednesday morning, the house smelled the way it only smells during those particular 4 days. Warm butter and sage, and the faint sweetness that comes from browning sugar on a stovetop without burning it. The dining room table was set for 7. My good linen cloth, the cream one, with the embroidered edge. I bought the year my daughter got married, and I wanted everything to feel like an occasion. The crystal glasses my late sister gave me when I retired. Polished twice over because the first time I thought I'd left streaks. Cloth napkins folded into fans, the way my mother always did them, because she said paper napkins were for paper feelings. I had moved the side table out to make room for the extra leaf, so everyone would have room to breathe. My daughter, Adrian, and her husband, their 3 kids, and my granddaughter, from Heath's first marriage, who always calls me by my first name, because someone had told her to. I had made her a little nameplate anyway, in pencil on a folded note card. I tucked it into my pocket while clearing the table that evening, without reading it again. By 3 in the afternoon, the turkey was done. The rolls had come out perfectly. The sweet potatoes were glazed and tender. The cornbread was cooling in the cast iron, and both pecan pies, my mother's recipe, handwritten on an index card I've kept in a plastic sleeve for 30 years, were resting on the rack by the kitchen window. I had baked 2 of them because one was never enough. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and looked at all of it. Food for 7 people, made by one. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. I got up and went to the front window, the one that faces the street, and stood there for a while looking at nothing in particular. November indicator had stripped the oaks bare. The sidewalk was empty. No cars turning in, no headlights. Just the late afternoon gray settling in like a second guest, nobody invited. I went back to the kitchen and stood at the counter long enough to know that no one was coming. Then I picked up my phone. I know I shouldn't look. I know, every time, how it ends. But I tapped through my daughter's Instagram stories the way you press a bruise just to confirm it's still there. There she was. Adrian, my only daughter, laughing with her head tipped back at Heath's parents' kitchen. The way she laughs when something genuinely catches her off guard. She had a glass of red wine and her cheeks were flushed and she looked completely, easily happy. Heath stood behind her with his arm around her shoulder. His family's kitchen was strung with those matching copper and rust garlands people buy at craft stores. Everything coordinated, everything chosen. I scrolled. The next slide was the food spread. A long table, candles, small decorative gourds tucked between the serving dishes. It was pretty. I had started to swipe past it when I stopped. In the center of the frame, there were 2 pecan pies. Homemade, I could tell by the crimped edges and the dark, even filling. My daughter had typed the caption herself. Heath's mom makes the most incredible pecan pie. Our favorite Thanksgiving tradition. I put the phone down on the counter and stood very still. I had taught Adrian that recipe the summer after her father died. She had been 26, newly married, and we were standing in this kitchen, trying to figure out what Thanksgiving could look like, now that it was just the two of us and whoever she brought along. She had written the recipe out in her own handwriting in the little notebook she kept for things she wanted to hold on to. I still have a photograph of her from that afternoon, flour on her apron, holding up a strip of lassus crust she'd cut herself, grinning. She had said, "Mom, this is the best thing I have ever tasted." She had always brought a store-bought pumpkin pie to Thanksgiving after that, because she said she didn't want to compete. Our favorite Thanksgiving tradition. I don't know why that particular thing was the one that broke through everything. The empty table hadn't done it. The 7-place settings I would be folding back up alone hadn't done it. The rolls I had baked from scratch that no one would eat hadn't done it. But 2 pecan pies claimed as someone else's tradition, captioned by my own daughter in someone else's kitchen. That was what found the gap. I walked to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't cry. I rarely do. I just sat and let myself see the thing clearly without softening the edges the way I had been doing for years. This was not a missed holiday. This was not a scheduling conflict or a lapse in communication. Not exactly. It was a pattern I had let run so long it had become invisible. The way the sound of a highway disappears after you've lived near it for enough years. I thought about the past several years, what they had actually looked like, stripped of the stories I had been telling myself. 2 winters ago, Heath's business had a hard stretch, and the 2 of them called me in a quiet panic about an insurance gap. I had set up an automatic transfer of $800 a month to cover the difference while they waited for things to stabilize. Things stabilized. The transfer kept going. I never mentioned it because I hadn't wanted anyone to feel embarrassed. Wilder. My grandson, their oldest, 16 years old, and one of the most privately serious people I have ever known, had been attending a small private school in Buckhead since 4th grade, the kind of school with a decent arts program and teachers who actually learn who their students are. I had been covering his tuition since the year Heath's business first contracted. He was a junior now. There was the year their second car gave out, and I wrote a check without being asked, because I had overheard Adrian mention it on a phone call with her sister-in-law, and I thought, I can make that easier. That's what I'm here for. I went to the nightstand and took out the small notebook I kept for my own financial records. Nothing formal, just columns in pencil, running totals I had written for my own reference over the years. I took it to the lamp and added everything up slowly, going column by column. $91,000, give or take. I held the notebook and looked at that number for a long time. $91,000, and I was not worth a phone call, not worth a conversation that might have been uncomfortable. Worth 9 words in a text message and a love you at the end, like a signature on a form letter. I set the notebook on the nightstand and picked up my phone. The after-hours line at my bank rang 4 times. A woman answered, calm, professional, the kind of voice that handles difficulties without adding to the difficulty of them. I told her I needed to end a series of recurring transfers from my account. All of them, the monthly contribution to my daughter's joint checking, the transfers to the school billing office, the insurance fund, everything with a standing order. She walked me through the confirmation steps. Are you certain about all of these, ma'am? I told her I was certain. I told her I would come in the following morning to sign the permanent termination paperwork. She wished me a good evening. I thanked her and hung up. The turkey was still warm in the oven. I turned off the oven light and closed the door without taking it out. I sat in the living room in the quiet and let myself think about what I was doing and why. It was not revenge. Revenge requires an audience. I was not angry, exactly, though I had been something in that direction earlier in the day. What I felt now was closer to clarity. The kind that comes when you stop explaining something to yourself and simply look at it. I had spent decades being the one who made things easier. I had told myself it was love, and it was love, at least in part. But somewhere along the way, the love had been taken for granted so consistently that it had been reclassified in everyone's minds, including, if I was honest, my own. I had become infrastructure, the kind of thing you don't think about until it stops working. The knock came just after 6. 3 quick knocks, a pause, then one more. I recognized the rhythm before I got up. My grandson was standing on the porch in a jacket too light for the evening chill, holding a covered plate with both hands. 16 years old, already taller than his father, with something careful in his eyes that has always been entirely his own. He looked at me without the performance teenagers usually put on when they're not sure what kind of reception they're walking into. "Grandma," he said, "I brought you some food from over there. I know it's not the same. Can I come in?" He had taken a rideshare across town by himself. He told me later he hadn't said where he was going. I stepped back and held the door open. He stood in the hallway for a moment and looked toward the dining room. The table still fully set, all 7 places, the crystal catching the overhead light. He looked at the food on the sideboard and the counter, still covered with dish towels. He took it in the way a careful person takes in a situation they were not prepared for, measuring it quietly. He didn't rush to fill the air with apologies or questions. He just looked at everything and then said, softly, "You cooked all of this." "I always do," I said. "Yeah," he said, "I know." We ate at the kitchen table, just the 2 of us. I gave him a proper plate because he is 16 and hollow-boned, and he came back twice for the sweet potatoes and once more for the cornbread, without asking permission, which told me he felt at home, which made me glad in a way I hadn't felt all day. He talked about his printmaking class and a show coming up in December. He talked about a book he was reading for English that he actually liked, which he said was a rare experience. He didn't mention his parents. I didn't ask. When we'd eaten, he dried the dishes while I washed. He did it without being asked, picking up the towel from the oven handle the way my husband used to, drying each piece carefully and setting it on the rack. I had to look away for a moment. Before he left, he reached into his jacket pocket and held out a folded piece of notebook paper with both hands, like something he had decided mattered. "I wrote this earlier," he said. "I wasn't sure I was going to give it to you, but I think I should." I waited until I heard the rideshare pull away before I opened it. His handwriting is large and a little uneven, the hand of someone whose thoughts move faster than his pen. The note read, "Grandma, I don't always understand the stuff that happens between grown-ups, and I know I'm probably not supposed to. But I was there today, and I saw the table. I saw the food. I saw your face when you opened the door. I'm going to remember that for the rest of my life. Whatever they said to explain it, I think they were wrong. I love you more than the pecan pie, and that is saying a lot. W." I sat on the couch with the note in my lap for a long time. The house felt different, not empty, something else entirely, like a room where someone has opened a window just enough to let the air begin to move. The calls started the next morning. Adrian first, her voice careful and managed, saying the school had sent a notice and she assumed it was a banking error. Heath second, shorter, saying there must have been a miscommunication. Adrian again, her voice less careful this time, something tighter in it. I did not return any of them. I put on the coat I had worn to my husband's memorial service. Dark wool, silver buttons at the collar, the kind that makes you feel like a person who knows their own mind, and drove to the bank to sign the permanent termination paperwork. On the way home, I called my attorney. We met Friday morning. I told him clearly what I wanted. The house to remain solely in my name, all financial accounts to pass through a trust, my grandson Wilder named as the primary beneficiary. I asked about setting up a separate education account for him, structured independently, with explicit instructions attached. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "These are sound decisions, sensible all the way through." I asked him if he had ever felt invisible while still being present in a room. He set down his pen and looked at me over the top of his glasses. "My son calls me on the 1st of every month," he said. "Has for 12 years, always the first, always about money." I understood. The documents were finalized and signed by Monday. That afternoon, my daughter came. She pulled into the driveway in the silver SUV and sat in it for nearly 2 full minutes before getting out. I watched from the window. She walked to the door without her usual composure, hair loose, no makeup, holding her bag against her chest like she wasn't sure of her welcome. I opened the door before she knocked. She came inside and sat in the living room chair across from me. She kept her coat on. She started with the money, the payment notifications, the school call, the disruption. I let her finish. I stopped the payments, I told her, because they had become invisible to you. Not inconvenient, invisible, the way running water is invisible until the pipe goes dry. She opened her mouth, she closed it. I didn't come to talk about money, she said finally. I came to say I was wrong. About Thanksgiving. I should have called. I should have told you weeks ago. I should have, she stopped. I should have invited you. That's the simple part. I don't know why I didn't. I think you do, I said gently. She looked at her hands. It's easier sometimes not to have the conversation. Easier for you, I said, not for me. Her eyes went wet. She didn't look away this time. I've been getting a lot of things wrong, she said quietly, not just this year. I did not move to reassure her. I used to do that without thinking, step in quickly to smooth the surface, to ease her discomfort, to absorb whatever was hard before it could settle on her. I didn't do that this time. I let her sit with what she had said. You can do it differently going forward, I told her after a moment. But differently means something now. It means you call because you want to talk to your mother, not because a payment bounced. It means Wilder's Schools communicates with me directly, because that arrangement is mine now and mine alone. It means when the holidays come, you think of me before it becomes a last-minute text. She nodded slowly, but she nodded. I'm not closing the door, I said, but the terms have changed, and I need you to understand that before you walk back through it. She left about 20 minutes later, not in anger. Thoughtfully, I think, in the way people leave when they've been handed something they weren't ready for but recognized they needed. I stood at the window and watched her drive away. Then I went to the kitchen and cut myself the last slice of pecan pie. 4 days old and still perfect. I ate it, standing at the counter, looking out at the backyard at the persimmon tree I had planted the first autumn after my husband died. I had forgotten it was out there. But there it was, small, heavy with fruit, brilliant orange against the gray November sky. All these years growing quietly while I wasn't paying attention. A week later, I sat down with my grandson at this same counter. He had texted asking if he could come over, and I had replied, "Come Saturday, bring an apron." He stood beside me while I walked him through every step of the pie, the crust first, the filling after, the temperature, the timing. He asked good questions. He paid attention the way people do when they actually care about the answer. When he crimped the crust himself and held it up to show me, I recognized something in his face that I had not seen in a long time. Pride. Uncomplicated, unperformed, real. When the pies were in the oven and the kitchen smelled the way it only smells in that one specific hour each year, he leaned against the counter beside me and said, "How come this feels different from other things I've learned?" I thought about it for a moment. "Because you chose to be here," I said. "Nobody made you come. You just came." He nodded, looking at the oven window. "Yeah," he said, "I just came." If you've ever set a table no one came to, if you've felt the particular weight of being the one who prepares, who shows up, who kept showing up long past the point anyone thought to ask, then you know what I'm talking about. You know how it feels to be moved from the center of something to the edges. So gradually you almost don't notice until you're looking at a room full of people you love, who have stopped seeing you standing in it. You don't have to keep handing yourself over to people who have stopped noticing the cost. You don't have to make yourself smaller to fit into a life where someone else has drawn the borders. Learn who comes when you stop making it easy not to. Pay attention to who knocks and when and why. And if this story sat beside something you've been carrying, share it. Leave a comment. Send it to someone who needs the reminder. You are not invisible. You are not optional. You never were.